once you have a child, you also need to, at the very same time, consider your insurances. I mean, life insurance, permanent disability, income protection, your trauma insurance, like that is even more important. And I think that it's important regardless. But that's even more important once you consider that, maybe it's previously a couple that are both contributing to a mortgage and expenses and are both working. And now all of a sudden there's...
Welcome to 360 Money Matters, where financial planners Billy and Andrew talk all things financial planning. This podcast aims to increase your knowledge and confidence with all things money. Each week, they will cover topics such as investing, cash flow, budgeting, saving, passive income, debt management, and much more, so you can live a life on your terms without limits.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the 360 Money Matters podcast. I'm Billy and I'm joined by my co-host,
Andrew. Bills, here we are, back again, back in front of the microphone, back in the recording studio.
Back, baby, we're back.
Oh, well, that's a bit of an insight as to what we're talking about today.
Just thought I'd drop that one in. Andrew, what are we talking to everybody about today?
Well, I decided to, create this topic so I could get some insights personally as to what to do. My wife is due for our second child at the end of this year, and so I want to know, how do you financially prepare for a baby?
You've already got a child, so we probably should have done this one a little while ago.
Well, obviously, I wasn't financially prepared for Jacqueline. She's in trouble.
Or the second one just makes things all that much more expensive, and we need to do an episode on it so you've got a little bit of clarity on what you should do.
Or I just wanted to, say something for a little bit of dramatic effect.
That's it. Well, we need a story behind it, right? Look,
exactly right.
I think the first one is, and it's... Look, we went through this quite some time ago, but I must say it was complicated back then.
Sorry, yeah, a very long time ago.
Isn't that long ago? But
very long.
You don't even know what I'm talking about.
No, it's just you had a baby quite some time ago. So if that was assuming back in your late 20s, maybe 30s,
back in the good old days, huh?
Would have been a solid 50 years ago now, right? Century.
Yeah, something like that. I completely forgot what I was going to talk about. Talking about parental leave entitlements. So government funded. It's obviously changed since we had gone through it. A little bit of complexity to it. So understanding what those entitlements are. Because I guess the thing that we tend to think about from our position as financial advisors is looking at this and going, okay, obviously the impact is going to be great to your personal life, but from a financial perspective, what's the financial ramifications? And really the simplest way to think about it, at least in our world, is you translate that to income and say, okay, we're used to, two incomes or whatever it may be, household income being X. We're going to lose an income for a period of time. How do we replace that? That's a really good place to start.
Yeah. Exactly right. So, getting a really solid understanding as to, one, how long do you intend to take off? Like, is it, going to be for a short period of time? Is it going to be for a long period of time? Is it, 12 months or 6 months or 9? Like, what does that ultimately look like? And who's going to take that time off? What income are you going to get? Is that going to be, government funded for all of it or part of it? Does your employer pay, a portion or all of it? Are you going to go, half pay over a period of time, but getting a solid understanding as to what your entitlements are, what your income is going to be. And one of the things that we do for clients is figuring out, I don't ever want to put a number on it, but most of the time, you're not going to be in a cash flow positive position if someone is going to be off work for, let's say, longer than what you're paid for from a government or employer parental leave. And so saying, okay, well, model that out. So look at, okay, firstly, it's, you figure out how much you're going to receive in parental leave entitlements. But if your income is going to go down and your expenses are going to stay where they are or increase, which we'll talk about, saying, okay, there's a negative cash flow position, let's say, and assuming that it's linear, which it usually isn't, but let's say that position is negative, $2,000 a month. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we expect our bank balance to decline by $2,000 per month, where, someone's going to take a year off work. So absolute bare minimum that we need in savings before baby comes along or before someone goes on leave is $24,000 plus maybe some buffer and all of that stuff in it. But getting an understanding of what position it's going to put you in at the end of that period and how much you need to have set aside.
Yeah, look, I think that's the simplest way to do it. One of the things that we found, at least when I went through it and when we were talking about this with clients and things like that, you're absolutely right. You convert that across to time, but to try and soften the blow, that half pay really seems like probably the best bit of advice or a tip that we could potentially give people in saying, okay, you're going to be in a cash flow deficit position for a period of time, and everybody is different depending on what that looks like. If you then take whatever entitlements that you are getting, and if you take them at half pay, okay, sure, it's half pay, but it lasts twice as long.
Yeah.
So it tends to, look, from a financial perspective, it's exactly the same. Psychologically, it just felt like you had a safety net for longer.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly right.
And look, yeah, in terms of, I guess my tip in terms of what that is, not only understanding the entitlements that you've got or that you can get access to, working through the cash flow position like what you were describing, Andrew, and then potentially consider saying, okay, let's split that in half and then let's make that last twice as long.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's another really, really good one. And thinking about it, and when you're starting to build this out, like building a baby budget, like as funny as that sounds, and understanding what combination of two things, right? So what are the upfront costs? How much do I need here and now? So things like setting up the nursery, a pram, a car seat, nappies, or not nappies, but setting up a pram, a car seat, all of those expenses. And then saying, okay, well, there's also going to be some ongoing costs once the little one comes along, and saying, okay, now I need nappies, now I need formula, now there's maybe childcare costs, there's an upfront budget, and then there's a, budget that'll happen in perpetuity moving forward as well. And getting us, really solid understanding of what that is and how that's ultimately going to be funded.
The only thing that I could add to that, and I'm really surprised at the market that's available. Not surprised at the marketing, but the amount of money and the variance that you could spend. And let's take a pram, because that's the first thing that comes to mind. The amount of money you can spend on a pram and the amount of money that you can spend on a pram, holy smoke.
Yeah.
It's huge. The difference is absolutely massive. And I don't really think that there's a huge amount of difference between the two. But what I'm saying, here we go. Okay,
been a while since you've had kids.
It's definitely been a while. And you know what? Look, my kids have survived, right? Look, they're thriving, they're surviving. So I don't know, man. I do see, especially photos, Instagram and stuff like that, where you've got these, call them designer prams, that are going for, I don't know, probably $2,500 a pop. You can get caught up in the excitement is all I'm saying. And then once you're talking about, building your budget and looking at those one-off costs, especially if you're furnishing a nursery and bits and pieces, some people get some family support, which is great, but think about the practicalityness of it. They grow up really, 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 really quickly. And if you're not careful, you can get swept up in it. And all it takes is the first upchuck and throw up, or, nappy leakage or whatever. I'm trying to keep this PG related. Yeah, I was going to use some of that, more graphic language and things, but just be mindful of that, because it can get really expensive and it's easy to get caught up in it.
Yeah. Look, 100% true. And even when you're talking about clothes and things like that, you can spend money on clothes and you can spend money on clothes, and, you talk to any parent about their experience, and in absolutely no time they've outgrown whatever you thought was going to last a year has lasted a month, and all of a sudden you're shopping for new stuff all over again. Really, I guess next sort of massive point within all of this, and this is not just once the baby arrives, it's not just assuming that, you've got a newborn or anything like that, but just in general, you need to adjust your emergency fund. Like if you thought that, okay, assuming that it's a couple and assuming that, this is, how much you've got in emergency savings, rainy day, all of that stuff. You throw into the mix that someone has, a child on top of it and another dependent, and all of a sudden where that emergency fund might have been here, it now needs to be up here because there's another mouth to feed. There's usually, maybe a larger place, a bigger mortgage. There's also another dependent that's reliant on your income. So making sure that there's a greater savings buffer in case anything does happen is hugely important.
Completely agree. It's probably a point in time in your life, looking back and reflecting on my own experience, you're probably the most vulnerable that you have been previously. You've got this thing that you're absolutely smitten with, that it's completely dependent and reliant on you.
Okay. Yeah.
They do look a little bit alien, when they're born and stuff like that. Anyway, but you've got this baby that's completely dependent on you. And then, you might be used to financial security of 2 household incomes. You might have, these great savings, emergency funds that you've depleted because you've gone into, building a nursery. You spent $2,500 on a pram or whatever it may be. The game changes. Your expenses get more regardless. You're entering into a period of time where you're going to have disruption to your household income for a period of time. And whether, there's 2 members of the family that go back to work, you might have costs like childcare costs associated with it. So it is at a time where you are more financially vulnerable. So you're absolutely right about the emergency fund. I think it's a really good opportunity to be able to revise that and say, hey, it's not where it needs to be. The game has changed for us as a family unit. We need to revise this. And the majority of the time, we're revising it up.
Yeah, exactly right. And on that topic, you start talking about, hey, okay, there's a greater, reliant on income, there's a greater risk that ultimately, is born once you see what I did there? Is born once you have a child. You also need to, at the very same time, consider your insurances. Life insurance, permanent disability, income protection, your trauma insurance, like that is even more important. And I think that it's important regardless. But that's even more important once you consider that, maybe it's previously a couple that are both contributing to a mortgage and expenses and are both working. And now all of a sudden there's one person that's taken a time period off work and they're looking after a child, and then the other person's income is now even more important. So if you don't have an income protection policy, it's not just 50% of the household income that's feeding, let's say, 2 people or, caring for 2 people. It's now 100% of the household income that's caring for 3 people. And the impact that has, which that's the simple one that people think about. I think the one that people don't think about is, okay, my partner is, taking some time off work and they're staying at home and looking after the child. And they say, okay, well, my partner doesn't need any life insurance because we're not relying on them financially. Mm-hmm. Well, not really, because put yourself in that position and say, okay, well, let's say, touch wood, your partner was either to pass away or suffer a medical event that would, render them unable to care for that child. All of a sudden there's childcare costs, there's medical bills, there's time that you need to take off work because you're then saying, okay, well, I now need to care for a child that's a dependent and also maybe a partner that's now also dependent on me. So the impact that can have financially is huge. So you do need to consider that just because, that person doesn't directly contribute to income into the household and doesn't financially contribute directly, there's still an indirect contribution that's happening, and making sure that person is protected as well from an insurance side of things is hugely important.
Yeah, that one can't overstate that one enough, right? Like, so I'm going to use some numbers associated with this just to try and demonstrate what this looks like, right? So in your instance that you were describing before, let's say that you've got one parent that works and the other one doesn't, and that's just how the the relationship is, and that works. And for the sake of the exercise, we'll say that that person generates 200 grand a year. If the person who's not working, if something happens to them and they pass away, we'll use that one because that's probably the easiest. The surviving spouse, the one who's earning the money, would be the one responsible for raising the child. So what we tend to think about from a life insurance point, just naturally we go, okay, we'll cover our mortgage and that should do us. That'll be okay. We won't have any debt. But then you think about a scenario like I've just described, and then you say, okay, in the event that there's not a person home to look after the child, that then falls onto the surviving parent, which then hampers their ability to work. So you say, okay, $200,000 of household income is now in jeopardy. So let's turn around, and this is, the examples that we tend to use when we're talking to clients. Let's turn around and say, okay, let's assume that you're not going to go back to work in any capacity for 5 years until the child is in prep, in primary school. That's 5 years at $200,000 a year. That's $1 million, just like that. Yeah. $1 million plus your mortgage. You're probably underinsured by, using that example, in excess of $1 million, all for a policy that could cost you somewhere in the hundreds of thousands of dollars to maybe the low thousands, depending on, your situation with work and your age and your smoker status and so on and so forth. Really easy one to miss. And for the amount of money that it costs and the amount of peace of mind that it can give a family, it's really a no-brainer. But yeah, you're right. People tend to pivot towards income protection. And when they think about insurance in particular, for life insurance, it's just enough to cover the mortgage, which I think is the wrong way to think about it.
Yeah, exactly right. And Bill's, thinking about it and saying, okay, well, yes, okay, maybe someone takes some time off work. Maybe that's, something that happens in the early years. Maybe it's something that happens long-term. But in the instance where someone takes time off work in the early years, again, you also need to think about some of the future costs. It's not just the here and now and just the expenses that are in front of me now, but childcare, like you ask any parent that is out there, it is not cheap.
No.
But also the cost and the expense of, okay, we're now needing to fund maybe $200 a day in childcare costs. And maybe that's 5 days a week, maybe that's 3 days a week, maybe that's 4. What are going to be the Centrelink rebates? What are some of the, costs longer term around schooling? How are you going to fund that? Is private school something that's going to be important? How do you prepare for that now while you're also thinking about all of the, craziness that's happening at the very same time? But planning childcare and education costs earlier, preempting them, knowing where they're going to land, and being able to pivot and move is, it's can't understate it.
I'll give you a personal example, what we experienced as well too. And this is probably not too dissimilar what people can experience, but how you need to be flexible in your thinking and your planning with this. So, my parents, there's an age gap between them. So mum's younger than dad. Dad had me later in life. So when we had our kids, mum and dad were helping us out a fair bit with basically coming over so Samantha and I could work. And then we found that as the kids got older and they're more active during the day. I wouldn't say it's easy, but it's almost easier when they're there and you just put them in one spot and they just sit there, they roll around and that's about it. But once they start, getting up and moving around, it's a full-time job and it can be quite exhausting. Anyway, I digress. So mum and dad were helping us out, and then it got to the stage where Samantha and I thought, hey, hang on a sec, this isn't right for my parents. It's too onerous for them. It's exhausting for them at the end of the week, especially for my dad who was older. We just couldn't do it anymore. So we decided to pivot away from that and put the kids into childcare. That wasn't an expense that we were expecting. So as you can imagine, kind of had this plan laid out and then something changed and we needed to pivot because of it.
Yeah.
And that's what it ended up looking like. So just keep in mind that certain things can and do happen and you need to be flexible in your thinking. The problem is, and one of the challenges that we face is that the childcare option is so damn expensive. And it keeps getting worse and worse.
Yeah. And there's instances where I've had clients that have made the decision to send kids to childcare, even though their net income will be very similar or the same, not because they're going to get any additional benefit by working, but just purely because they want to keep their job and have something to be able to go back to once the kids are a little bit older. So, I mean, considering your career and considering, you know, the income that you're also receiving off the back end of it is just a balancing act that families need to ultimately go through.
Then thinking about income, Andrew, and rebalancing your priorities as a family. So if you're putting money into an investment, if you're making additional debt repayments, if you're doing something, you know, that you've been doing for a period of time, and then baby comes along and all of a sudden money's not as free-flowing as what it used to, thinking about some of those things and potentially saying, okay, for a period of time, what we're going to do is we're going to pivot. We might stop putting, as an example, money into investments. Actually, don't do that. Or we're going to start putting money into, stop putting money, additional money onto the mortgage or whatever it may be. So pivoting your goals temporarily for a period of time to then compensate for the life stage that you're going through is definitely another way that we see parents manage that process, because it really comes in thick and fast from absolutely everywhere. It's a challenging time because you're sleep deprived. You know, they all go through different things. I've got a big smile on my face because I'm through all of this stuff and just thinking about what Andrew's going to go through. Just thinking through and just because you pause something and pivot, just keeping in mind that it is temporary and not beat yourself up about it, because everybody needs to do what they need to do at a particular point in time in order to get through it.
Yeah. And that's a huge point that sometimes you think about is the psychology of it. And, you know, we've seen it with clients all of the time, which you can do the numbers and you can budget and say, okay, we expect our cash flow, you know, our bank account's going to deplete by X amount over this period of time. And, you know, this is what we're going to do to, you know, try and limit that impact, pausing contributions, all of that stuff. But when it happens, mentally, I think that there's also, you know, something that you need to get over, because I think prior to that, you know, if you're doing things correctly, you've got this linear growth in terms of, you know, how your wealth is increasing. And that just becomes a matter of course that my wealth is going to increase if that's going to happen consistently. And then you go through a period of time where you see your wealth either stagnate or potentially decline. And all of a sudden, I think mentally that can sometimes be a hard thing to deal with. And sometimes the conversations that I'm having with clients is actually not one of finances.
Yeah.
And having someone else there to say, hey guys, this is what we're paying for.
Yeah.
Like it's not the end of the world. This is exactly what we expected to happen. Yes, your offset account balance has gone down. Yes, we might not have contributed to the investment account. Under normal circumstances, alarm bells will be ringing. But hey guys, remember we planned for this. Like this is why we did what we did. And it gives people that peace of mind of, okay, like we're not in dire straits. We knew this was going to happen and that was always part of the plan.
The other thing too, I mean, there's so much pressure on new parents when this stuff does happen. Just give yourself a break.
Yeah.
Because it can really cook your head. And especially, you know, in the instance, and this was the case for us, but you kind of, you know, you've got this other person to protect and raise and what have you. And it's like, yeah, you know, I've got to create a future for them and make sure that we're financially secure and all of this stuff. Yeah. And if you need to pivot, it's kind of, it goes up against that. And you look at it and it kind of does that to you and you go, okay, what impact is that having? But taking a step back, going, no, this is only temporary. It's only a period of time. And it does get, you know, when you do start receiving income back in the household, when either both parents go back to work or it might be part-time or what have you, it does get easier. Yeah. So just keeping that in mind at the forefront, because it can do your head in. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think lastly, another, you know, it is a good time to start reviewing your wills, looking at your guardianships, your beneficiaries, making sure that things are structured correctly. If touch wood, something was to happen, you want to know and you want to have peace of mind that, yep, all of that stuff is taken care of. And all I need to worry about is just making sure that I get that structure right in the beginning, that I, you know, review it, make sure that it's still aligned with my wishes and my goals. And that's it. So I think that, you know, one of the things that can sometimes be overlooked with all of the noise that's happening is it probably, if you haven't already gotten a will, it's probably about time that you do.
Well, you're a parent now, you've got to do it, right? So it's a morbid thought, but look, we have to do it. And just do it.
Yeah, exactly
My
right.
famous words of Nike, just do it.
New sponsor for the show, Billy.
I'm not wearing a Nike top, so maybe next time. What do you reckon? Andrew, thanks for today.
Thanks, Bills. Appreciate it. Thanks to all of our listeners and our viewers. Hope you got a heap of value out of that one. If you did, like, subscribe, and forward it on to the expecting parents that are going to be in my shoes. And we look forward to catching you on the next podcast.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening today. If you have any questions on what we talked about or would like to have a chat about your money journey, visit us at 360fs.com.au.
The information in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into account your personal objectives, financial situation, or needs. It is not financial, legal, or tax advice and should not be relied upon as such. You should consider whether the information is appropriate to your circumstances and seek professional advice before acting on any of the information provided. Past performance is not a reliable indicator of future performance. This information is provided by Billy Amaritis and Andrew Nicolaou of 360 Financial Strategists Proprietary Limited, authorised representatives and credit representatives of Acumen Financial Planning Proprietary Limited.